dog exhibiting more than one of these. So in other words, there are other reasons why the dog exhibits some of these behaviors individually, but you rarely see combinations of these behaviors in a dog that does not show stress, does not stress. So we have things like dilated pupils, shaking, yawning, and scratching, refusing food or treats, refusal to open a mouth. When Christine and I walk in and Louisa walk in the door and you've got an anxious dog, you've got an aggressive dog, and you throw that meatball at their head and they ignore it, then you know you're in trouble. The huge factors we really want to know about is exposure to aversive punishment techniques, training techniques. Minimizing stress in the long term, and again, I want to sort of tie this in not only with the idea of confrontational training techniques, but also some of what we've talked about in terms of behavioral genetics and social structure. So handler body language, how do you minimize this? What are we doing in with person's home? What can you do in the clinic? Handler's body language, not being confrontational is basically what we train vets and vet techs and owners about. No negative interactions, dog or humans on leash. One of the most critical causes for anxiety and triggers for anxiety is dogs being on leash and having a negative experience with humans or with dogs on leash because they're trapped. And then you have a lack of an escape route. And so negative interactions on leash are a major factor with anxiety. Understanding stress and understanding the body language, being able to be sensitive to body language in these dogs. Minimizing stress over the long term, we talk about things like, and the big one is positive socialization, conditioned emotional response, positive interactions between humans and dogs, or between dogs and dogs if we're talking about other forms of anxiety. Here, where we're talking about confrontational training techniques, how do we fix these problems? We have to basically make the interaction with the human, and often the owner, positive again. And that's what Christine was talking about in terms of counter conditioning and conditioning positive emotional responses. And these things basically preclude these confrontational training techniques. We know that confrontational training techniques produce these kinds of anxiety behaviors, produce these kinds of problems, and will only continue to make it a worse situation. Okay. In training, then, we can apply these things. For instance, no neck collars. So how are we reducing confrontation is really what it comes down to. No neck collars, no prong collars, no choke collars, no e-collars. The one that we haven't seen any data that shows it, we have seen data and we haven't seen any negative effects is citronella bark collars. They seem to be so mildly aversive that they don't tend to produce anxiety in most dogs that have been studied. The trick is that they are so mildly aversive, they also don't work in most dogs in which they've been studied, but at least they don't produce more problems. Don't make the situation worse is the first rule. E-collars or top attaching harnesses. And so again, for a lot of dogs, the top attaching harness is very, very stressful. So we really try to get dogs into either the snout attaching harnesses or front attaching chest harnesses. No use of so-called dominance techniques or punishment techniques is what I like to call them. Dominance does not play a role in this kind of stuff. This is not a social structure situation. Stop alpha rolling the dog, pinching the dog, spraying the dog. Don't be confrontational. You do not need to be a better leader. You just need to train your dog. And the dog is going to learn more effectively. And so that's sort of a fringe benefit, a good side effect to taking this approach. So in summary, just a few take-home messages. Coming back to my concern is with these punishment-based techniques. First is distinguishing and being honest about punishment-based techniques versus pack theory, behavior modification and the whole dominance things. And so, as far as I'm concerned, what we're seeing on the National Geographic Channel is a mixture. And there's this program where they are trying to use pack theory and social dominance. There are very few dogs in which that's necessary, very few dogs in which that's even appropriate or useful or meaningful. And then it sort of slides over in most cases to, quite frankly, nothing about being a good leader, nothing about being a stronger leader, and all about just being a punishment approach. And I'm not saying a punishment approach can't work. I'm saying it can be easily misused and have produce a negative side effects of anxiety. And I think we're seeing this very, very, very commonly. The most common form of aggression we see is anxiety-based aggression, and in many, many cases, it's from the misuse of these techniques.